Hi everyone. So I've learned over the years that my strength is not in the immediate lightning fast thought or response, but a more slower, more considered response. When I compose, my first ideas tend to be pretty average, and it's only after reconsidering and reconsidering from every angle that I'm able to build them into something a bit more interesting. And the same's true for my video essays. Most of the time I write a first draft full of logical holes, and then I take time to reconsider it from all the angles I can. It's actually one of the things I love about doing YouTube. I know that if I leave something illogical, something ill thought through, I can be absolutely certain that one of you will pick up on it and point it out. That certainly forces me to take care in everything I say, which is a discipline I really enjoy. But in my last video, Music versus Patterns, I probably got a bit cocky. The main point I was aiming for was to raise the understanding I felt I'd gained from writing my violin concerto. The fact that as I'd included more patterned music in my work, it had led to an apparently less human kind of music. And I thought I'd found a way to tie it into the hole punch cards of the mechanical machines and so on. But that was just a first draft. I had something of a feeling that I'd really got the hang of quickly generating new scripts and videos, as this one had come together and been completed in just 2 days. But that cockiness meant I hadn't given it that crucial second, third and fourth rounds of consideration. So there were quite a few inconsistencies and ill thought through ideas in what I said, which I realised within minutes of uploading once the comments started coming in. The simplest mistake I made was in not drawing a distinction between the composed patterns of some of the examples and the performance of patterns by the mechanical instruments. The idea that anything that converts a pattern into sound is not quite real music, as I suggested, is frankly a bit dumb. That would mean that nothing that happens to come from a MIDI file could be considered music, which, considering it was performed on a digital piano, would include my own Bach piece I posted the week before. It would also include Nan Caro, as well as an awful lot of great music. There's certainly a point to be made there about how much a pure pattern in, let's say, a MIDI file can be converted into a musical performance. And several of you pointed out the various humanizing plugins and approaches that are available in digital audio software to attempt to do just that. But that's really nothing to do with compositions that are built fundamentally out of patterns. And there too I made some far too sweeping statements. I remember when writing the script thinking that I should find somewhere to talk about minimalism, but it didn't fit anywhere very well into the flow of the script. Minimalism is an example of how music of pure pattern can be very successful. At its very simplest, Steve Reich's clapping music is as clear an example as you can get of one pattern creating an entire piece. And as someone reminded me, Morton Feldman also conducted some fascinating experiments into pattern. And this quote from him is useful. The most interesting aspect for me composing exclusively with patterns is that there is not one organisational procedure more advantageous than another, perhaps because no one pattern ever takes precedence over the others. The compositional concentration is solely on which pattern should be reiterated and for how long. So the point being that even pieces that are constructed purely of pattern still have a great deal of thought, choice and possibility put into which particular patterns are used and which material goes into those patterns. The idea, which I at least implied, that pure pattern was mechanical, inhuman and not something you'd sit down and listen to in your living room, was frankly just wrong. Here's a good example of a piece which one commentator pointed out is both strictly rule-following patterned but also very, well, emotional. This is Arvo Pärt's Cantus in Memoriam Benjamin Britten. I still need to think a bit more about it, but perhaps it has more to do with a sense of agency, the sense of who is speaking in the piece, which I talked a bit about a while back in a video on finding the voice in a piece of music. So in Arvo Pärt's piece, yes, it sounds emotional, but it doesn't sound like an individual talking directly to us. It sounds more like maybe some external being, some power or some force. I think it's true that in most of the pieces that involve pure pattern, you wouldn't get the sense of an individual speaking directly to you. The agency of the piece feels different, more distant. I think that's right. And finally, I think I should have tried a bit harder to define what I even mean by pattern. In the Stockhausen Klavierstücke example, the total serialism, total pattern piece One commentator suggested that at the surface level of the music there is quite deliberately absolutely no pattern, and that's why it sounds so similar to the cage. And as someone else said, we are pattern-finding machines, and in some sense all music is pattern of one kind or another. So really distinguishing between the perceived surface level pattern and any deeper patterns would have been more useful, I think. I think what I was mostly wanting to talk about was the surface level patterns that we all can perceive, or most of us can perceive. So perhaps some of those total serial examples weren't that useful. So anyway, it's a complicated subject, but for me anyway, it's been a useful reminder to myself to remain humble and to keep thinking from all those different angles as much as possible. Of course, it's part of the deal with YouTube that you put it out there and you're stuck with it. You can't edit it, you can only delete it. So this video is really just to acknowledge that I could have done better, and that I'm looking forward to moving on.